Hey stakers, welcome to community call number 29 with the eStaker. We are hosting EigenLayer today. We are going to get to know EigenLayer and we are going to get to know what the product is. We were just talking about how a lot of people know the word EigenLayer, but they don't actually know what the purpose of the protocol is. So we are going to get into some high level stuff and maybe a little bit of nitty gritty stuff. Let me introduce you to everybody. This is we have the eStaker team. We have Superfizz, Remy, Nolan, and Buddha, and I'm Nyx. And we also have the EigenLayer team. We have Shriram and Jeffrey. Can you guys introduce yourselves a little bit?
Yeah, great to be here to take part in this taker call. I'm Sriram, founder of EigenLayer. I've been working on this project over the last 1.5 years. Before that, and currently on leave from the University of Washington, Seattle, where I run the University of Washington Blockchain Research Lab. Jeffrey?
Yeah, and I'm Jeffrey. I lead the smart contracts team at EigenLayer, and also really happy to be joining today.
Awesome. It's great to have you guys. Hey, Fizz, could you give a little bit of an introduction on who was eStaker and what the purpose of these community calls is?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I got distracted by a complaint of an echo in YouTube, and now I'm going to turn directions. Hey, so I'm Superfizz from eStaker. eStaker is an organization where I think we're about 8 or 9 core members right now, and we have a community of about 50,000 people. Many of the people who stake from home on the Ethereum Beacon chain consider themselves part of the eStaker community. We have a very strong ethos of being welcoming first and knowledgeable second. So that means if you come to any of our communities, whether it's Reddit, Discord, Twitter, our intention is to welcome you regardless of how you stake and then share knowledge with you. And so it would be very easy for us to prefer, like, oh, well, you stake with a certain exchange, we don't want you. That is absolutely not the way that we operate. No matter how you stake on the Ethereum Beacon chain, we want to welcome you into our community. And yes, along with that, we may share best practice to help you become a more effective staker. Our ultimate goal is to decentralize the Ethereum Beacon chain because we believe that through decentralization, the Ethereum Beacon chain can be a powerful and robust chain that will carry all of us into the future. We share a belief that the greatest investment you can make in Ethereum is decentralizing the chain rather than extracting maximum profit today. So those are our big beliefs. Like I said, you can find us on primarily Reddit or Discord. Most people kind of like are in one place or the other, but we're glad to have you. And yeah, that's us. How did I do next?
Awesome. So we're just gonna ask a few questions, and then hopefully anybody in the YouTube chat, anybody in the Discord, and the ETH Finance Daily can ask any questions, and we'll keep an eye out for their questions at the end. Shriram and Jeffrey, I have a question for you guys, and I hope that you guys can. This is going to be a hard ask, but can you distill EigenLayer to 1 or 2 sentences to begin with to give like a very high level?
Yes. EigenLayer is a mechanism by which Ethereum stakers can provide additional services, which could be validating new kinds of middleware, new kinds of chains, new kinds of services, and earn an additional yield by doing so. Ethereum stakers participate in EigenLayer and provide additional services by running additional node software and gain additional rewards.
Awesome. And so now can you give a longer explanation, maybe? I'm sure that you're very familiar with people asking you.
Explain like I'm 5, explain like I'm 15, explain like I'm a PhD. Yeah.
Okay, the next level of explanation would be EigenLayer. We call it a reinstaking collective. And one of our principles is to maximize the surface of innovation that is built on this Ethereum decentralized trust network. And we just, let's zoom out a little bit and go back to, say, 2013, 2014, when Ethereum was launched. And if you look at the world at that time, whenever you want to build an application, Bitcoin was there, this great paragon of decentralized trust just got launched, and this idea that we don't need a single trusted party to run complex systems is out in the air. You want to create a new decentralized application, what do? You have to go start a whole new chain, for example, at the time people were trying to build a decentralized naming system, a Namecoin was born, the idea that any new application that needs to be created needs to create its own new decentralized trust network. This was the kind of paradigm, prior to Ethereum. And I think Ethereum pioneered this like absolutely insane idea that we are going to have this common decentralized trust network, and on top of which anybody can come and write their programs in this common language, the Ethereum virtual machine, and throw these smart contracts on top of this common platform. So all these applications share this common trust layer. This led to something that we've now taken for granted in this space, the idea of that the application creators don't need to be trusted because trust is underwritten by the blockchain. And the second order implication of this is the creation of the pseudonymous economy, where I don't need to reveal my identity because you don't need to trust me. You only need to trust the Ethereum chain, and I can now go and create new smart contract applications. And as long as you can vet the application code, you can actually trust that this is the Ethereum blockchain is going to continue executing it correctly. This is a huge upgrade to actually something very fundamental in our society, because now an innovator doesn't need to be trusted themselves. Blockchain underwrites trust for them. So this is just, I think, as much of a paradigm shift as venture capital. The idea that somebody creates innovation, but somebody else brings capital, and these two can work together and create new applications. It's the same level that the decoupling, the separation of innovation and trust. Somebody brings innovation, blockchain underwrites trust, and both of them work together. So this is the story, at least one part of the story, the way we see what really Ethereum did, when it started. And it has grown, and the same vision, and we see Ethereum continuing to double down on this exact vision. And we see, for example, the paradigm of layer 2 and rollups as exactly fitting into this vision. The idea that, hey, I or let's say anybody else can come and create new layer 2 solutions with absorb the trust of Ethereum. And the idea of layer 2 is, I don't want all computation to be done on top of the Ethereum common platform. I offload computation, but make proofs in one way or the other that the computation is done correctly on the Ethereum platform. So Ethereum started with this idea of being this decentralized trust network, underwriting applications, but then expanded that out even more in the layer 2 paradigm, where they say, you can actually run whole chains called these rollups, which then absorb trust from Ethereum. So basically, the paradigm is it's becoming more programmable. I think of EigenLayer as the natural next step in this paradigm. The idea is when you stake in Ethereum, now you have this decentralized trust network of stakers. And can we participate in additional services? To understand this, first, let's understand what you cannot do with just the layer 2 paradigm. For example, let's say I had an idea for how to run a different consensus protocol. Okay, it's an innovation, right? Somebody may have ideas. Ethereum has a great consensus protocol, but there's always ways to improve it. And so the question is, if somebody has this idea, hey, I have this new consensus protocol, what can I do? Today, the only thing you can do is you have to go and start a new chain, a new blockchain, a new layer 1 to say that, yeah, I have this new consensus protocol, I'm going to start this new blockchain. Another example, I have an idea for how to do better sharding or scaling, in some way. No, I have to go and start a new blockchain just for that purpose. I have an idea for how to build a better decentralized Oracle. You don't have to go and create a new blockchain, but you have to create your own trust network, a group of nodes which validate the Oracle price fields. I have an idea for how to do a decentralized data storage network or a data availability network. I have to go and create a new network of nodes and a community around it to actually go into it. every new innovation requires us to go and create a new trust network if the layer of innovation is deeper than what the interfaces Ethereum offers today. Like you have the interface at the level of EVM, you can reprogram, you have the interface at the level of the layer twos, which is you can offload computation, but there are a lot of other things for which you have the only option is to go and create these alternative new chains. And what EigenLayer, before I explain EigenLayer, just one brief thing is how we came up with this idea, or why we had to come up with this idea, is as I mentioned, as part of the University of Washington faculty, and there we were running this thing called the University of Washington Blockchain Research Lab, where we did a lot of work on how to improve consensus protocols, how to add new features of attributability and accountability, how to scale data availability, all of these different kinds of things, where many people have different ideas for how to improve these features. And we were just one of those teams. But the problem was any new idea that we created, the only way we could see how to take it and let the community benefit from it was to go and create a whole new chain. Of course, one way to contribute is to participate in the EIP process and propose Ethereum improvement proposals. But at the end of the day, Ethereum can only have one consensus protocol. It cannot have 10 consensus protocols. So there is no place to permissionlessly experiment with these new ideas. And so we've been kind of thinking about this question: how can we take these existing trust networks and let more services and more innovation be built on top of it? And so that is the underlying problem for which EigenLayer is a solution. The idea of EigenLayer is all ETH stakers can opt in to this EigenLayer platform. I'll explain how to opt in later, but you opt into the EigenLayer platform as an ETH staker, and you can say that I'm providing now service for this new chain or a new Oracle or a new data availability or a new settlement layer or whatever new things that are now being built. I can opt in to provide services for them. And what does it mean to opt in and provide services? You are now participating in the validation of these other things in addition to running the get node and the consensus node that you're running today. So that is the core idea. EigenLayer lets new ETH stakers provide new services. And so the service creators don't have to go and create a new network for every single idea that they have. Yeah, Superfizz.
So I'm always about the big picture. And I have to be careful about calling myself an ETH maxi, but I am a person who believes at this time that the Ethereum beacon chain is bringing the most value to any cryptocurrency ecosystem. And that's my central belief. The Ethereum beacon chain is the most valuable product in cryptocurrency right now. EigenLayer it sort of sits on top of that. So all other existing products sit below that. They are, layer 2 solutions or transactions or smart contracts. And so it causes me to ask the question, and I've already asked you this privately, but I'd like to hear it again publicly. As something that sits on top of the beacon chain, what is your sense of whether it is extractive from the beacon chain, as in taking the security that the beacon chain has developed and repurposing it for something else, versus whether it's additive to the beacon chain by maybe somehow bringing value back?
Yeah, absolutely. So we absolutely believe that it is additive, and we put a lot of thought into how to make it more additive than one might otherwise design the system for. So the first aspect is Ethereum stakers, when they opt in and provide these additional services, they are earning additional ETH, right? So if you're getting whatever, 5% today, maybe by opting in to EigenLayer, you could get 1, 2, 3 more %. And that is an additional value that Ethereum stakers are actually getting. And what happens when the yield goes up is when, let's say, yield goes up for the current $25 billion worth of staking, if it goes up from 5% to 7%, there is an incentive for more stakers to come on board because there is more yield available. So more stakers turn on and provide security to both the Ethereum chain and all these other services built on top. And so this is another dynamic that happens on EigenLayer is as you start providing services to other modules that are built on top of EigenLayer, you can actually increase first was increasing the net yield. Second was increasing the net staking, right? So that's a second order consequence. A third order consequence is increase the net value of ETH itself, because the value of ETH is in some sense all the future value of fees that you could earn out of staking and other services that are being provided. So immediate increase the value of yield. Second order effect, increase the total amount staked. So actually it's not just extracting the juice out of the existing stake. We are actually potentially contributing more people to stake. And then the third order effect is ETH itself goes up in value because it is the total value of all fees earned through all the services provided. So that's the three levels. And in terms of applications built, one of the things we've put in a lot of thought into is how do we build new applications on top of EigenLayer, which are compatible with the decentralization ethos of Ethereum. What we do not want, if this system was built, with a different view, one could say, oh, just take all, the hardest software to run, and maybe a Solana or something else, and then say that just restake and run it on top of EigenLayer. And what that would do is basically, the home staker and the broader decentralized staking community may not be able to participate in those services, and it will drive relative yield towards the more centralized nodes. We do not want that. What we are trying to do is to encourage and build services on EigenLayer which are compatible with the decentralization ethos. The idea that any home staker can opt in and participate in these additional services. So that is the two ways. One is adding value back to yield, staking, and like the value to the token itself. And the other mechanism is how do we ensure that the decentralized nodes can participate in it. Jeffrey, do you want to add something on this?
Yeah, so just to summarize a lot of what Sriram's said already, our goal with EigenLayer is definitely to achieve kind of a vision of both leveraging and reinforcing what we see as the most valuable thing in Ethereum, which is its community. Obviously, the Ethereum code is open source. Anybody could launch their own chain, but it doesn't have that same community behind it. And we see the incredible value and drive in the Ethereum community, and we want to enable people in the community to do more things, to build more applications and to support more applications. And yeah, as Sriram was explaining, we really do think that bringing more applications into the fold, especially light applications, can help reinforce the decentralization of the community.
So can you give us an overview of what participating in EigenLayer is like for home stakers? Like what sort of software do you have to run?
Yes. So what does participating in EigenLayer look like? First thing is how do you commit to participating in EigenLayer? The idea is that you, whenever you're staking, you have your withdrawal credentials. Usually you'll set it, as a home staker to your own, wallet. Instead, when you want to restake on EigenLayer, you're setting the withdrawal credentials to the EigenLayer smart contracts. So EigenLayer is not a new chain or anything. It's just a series of smart contracts on Ethereum that you are basically opting into as a staker. The one way that a home staker can opt into EigenLayer is by setting the withdrawal credentials to the EigenLayer smart contracts. So what this does is in the normal path, when you trigger your withdrawal, it will go to the smart contract, and the smart contract will then pass it back to you along with any rewards you have earned through the EigenLayer process, because that's what happens in the normal path. But in the path in which so you opt into EigenLayer by setting the withdrawal credentials, and then inside EigenLayer, you can opt into which services on EigenLayer are you opting into. This is also a free market. So you can say, I'm opting into this service because it's lightweight, I can run it at my home, and I have enough hardware to do it. This other service is whatever, it's too heavy load, I don't want to do it. You don't want to opt into it. So when you're opting into EigenLayer, you have this degree of freedom of which set of services. EigenLayer is not a monolithic bundle that you have to run everything. And so there is no prescribed amount of hardware that is necessary or sufficient. There'll be lightweight services. There may be some heavy services. We don't know what will happen there. But you opt into EigenLayer, and then you opt into which set of services you are actually selecting. And for each of those services, you have to download and run additional node software for those services. Like you're running the beacon chain code, the get node, the consensus layer, and the execution layer. You also run these other services. Usually these services don't really interact with your consensus layer node and get, execution layer node. These are just like completely independent software, but you're running it. You could potentially run it on the same node. You could run it on a different node. In fact, we're also allowing home stakers to even delegate just the EigenLayer part of the validation. I want to continue to be a validator for Ethereum, being a home staker, but for some EigenLayer services, I want to, delegate to somebody else. That's an option, but you want to do it yourself. That is also an option. So on EigenLayer, you set the withdrawal credentials. Once you need to get the withdrawal credentials, you can you set the withdrawal credentials, you opt into some set of services, you download the according software, and then you run it. And to ensure the integrity that stakers who are opting into the services are providing these services correctly, each of these services will have a provable on-chain smart contract for slashing. This slashing conditions would be something like if you're running a new data system, then if you don't serve the data within a certain amount of time when you're randomly sampled and asked to produce the data on Ethereum, if you don't do it, then you may lose a portion of your stake. So there is a on-chain slashing system which is run on Ethereum. This is not run on anywhere else. So when you're opting in, you're setting the withdrawal credentials, you're choosing which services to run, you're downloading those services and then running them, and the service contracts specify what the kind of reward conditions is and also what the slashing conditions are. Okay, so that is the on-chain system. And like I mentioned, there's also an option for delegation, which means I want to only run my ETH. I'm a home staker. I believe in decentralization, and this is fundamental. But who wants to run all these other EigenLayer services? I want to earn the additional yield, but I don't want to do it at my home. I want to delegate it to somebody else. You can do it. So that's the paradigm that we're building. Jeffrey, you want to add anything on this?
Yeah. So I do want to say we're really trying everything we can to support all types of stakers and make it possible for home validators to opt in and serve any of the services built on top of EigenLayer. Like I said, we really think that decentralization is a huge part of the value of Ethereum. And I think we're trying to help applications actually get the real decentralization of Ethereum.
Logistical question. Just to clarify, so if somebody wants to participate in EigenLayer, it's post withdrawals, EigenLayer is live. Do they have to withdraw their stake and restake using EigenLayer's contract?
Great question. Jeffrey, do you want to take this?
Yeah. So with the Capella hard fork, the upcoming hard fork, it will be possible for validators who have what's called 0x0 withdrawal credentials to do a one-time change from their 0x0 credential to a 0x1 credential. And that's from a BLS key to like a normal Ethereum address. So it turns out that's actually something like 300 to 350,000 of the existing validators. And right now, that one-time switch is the only mechanism to change your withdrawal credentials without withdrawing and redepositing. So we have designed a system to allow people to allow validators to repoint their withdrawal credentials to our smart contracts. And we're hopeful about launching in time to allow people to transfer their withdrawal credentials in a timely manner.
Nice.
I have a few questions now. So if people stake on a EigenLayer, what are the hardware requirements and bandwidth requirements? And assuming that, like, if someone stakes from home, their hardware is usually limited. And let's assume that there are 10 different EigenLayers. How do you incentivize those stakers to use your EigenLayer?
Yeah, so when you stake on EigenLayer, when you restake on EigenLayer, essentially what happens is you can specify which other set of services you're running. And different services. So this is an emerging market, so we don't know what services will be built on top. But I will particularly comment on the hardware requirements for the first service we are building ourselves, which is called EigenDA. I'll explain that that service. But before that, the idea is that once you opt into EigenLayer, you can use the same stake across many services built on top of EigenLayer. So a service like a system like EigenLayer is most beneficial if a lot of stakers opt in, because then we can channel the Ethereum trust to many services that can then be built on top. So we'll explain the first service built on top of EigenLayer that we are building ourselves and what the hardware requirements for something like that are. The particular service we are building is tuned towards the modular rollup ecosystem that is now emerging on Ethereum. And all the rollups today have to write data to Ethereum, and this is one bottleneck for these rollups. A dominant fraction of the rollups cost is actually writing data to Ethereum, and that is why we have, of course, in the Ethereum community, this roadmap where we want to get EIP 4844 called proto danksharding, which is an upgrade to Ethereum, which enhances the data bandwidth. And then a later upgrade called danksharding, which enhances the data bandwidth even more. But what we found is that there are really breakthrough ideas underneath this roadmap of danksharding. And which of those ideas can we already absorb and build an architecture that we can deliver this additional data bandwidth, as soon as possible. And it is possible for a layer like us to do it because firstly, of all the work that has already gone in the Ethereum research community, but also because, on a layer, on an additional layer on top of Ethereum, it is much easier to experiment with new ideas and, modifications in engineering architecture that is more difficult to do on Ethereum. So the first service we're building is called EigenDA, Eigen Data Availability. And right now, the total data bandwidth on Ethereum, which is if you just want to use Ethereum as a ledger to write data, not for anything else, if you just want to use Ethereum to write data, you can actually get 83 kilobytes per second of data returned to Ethereum. With upcoming upgrades like proto danksharding EIP 4844, this could go up, depending on the parameters, like a 2 to several x, like 4x or 8x, depending on how the parameters are set. And with danksharding, this is expected to go up to 1.3 megabytes per second. And what we are building is a system which can already hit something like 10 megabytes per second. And the way we do it, unlike other systems which are so-called scalable, outside, what they do is they say that, this system's high performant because, the system achieves, let's say 5 megabytes per second, but each node's requirement is like 200 megabytes per second, right? And that is one way to achieve scaling. We don't believe it is scaling because it is getting scaling by saying that nodes have more bandwidth. We don't see that as fundamentally an aspect of scaling. The way we define scaling is what is the system throughput divided by what is the node requirements. If I do not get this ratio to be bigger than 1, then I'm not scaling. So the system throughput in the case that I mentioned is we are targeting 10 megabytes per second. The node bandwidth we are targeting is 0.2 megabytes per second. That's actually even lower than what Ethereum needs. And we've necessarily kept it much lower than what Ethereum needs because we want home stakers to participate in the system, because we want the system. In fact, this is actually Vitalik and Justin Drake and Don Kraft's realization is it is possible to provide scalable data availability. And by essentially spreading data on many, many nodes, each node only touches a little bit of data, but the data is encoded and like committed in a way that even if a lot of nodes go away, we can still recover all the data. So that is the underlying premise of the modular roll-up future that the EF pivoted towards. And what we're doing is basically just taking some of those best ideas and building an engineering architecture that can actually get as close as possible to the theoretical limits out there. So the reason we're able to achieve 10 megabytes per second, where each node only does like 0.2 megabytes per second, is because no node ever touches all the data. Every node touches only a little bit of the data. Data is split into small chunks. Every node samples a little bit of the data, but together all the nodes have enough information that even if a lot of nodes go away, we can still reconstruct all the data. So this is the EigenDA system. And the node requirements, like I mentioned, are primarily in bandwidth, something like 0.2 megabytes per second. Maybe with all the slack, it comes up to 0.5 megabytes per second. This is megabytes, not bits. But so that's the node requirements. There'll be some storage requirements, which should be of the order of 200 to 400 gigabytes of storage, which I think is pretty much in range for most of the Ethereum nodes. This is EigenDA, the system that we are building, and we put in as much of thought possible to make sure that the decentralized Ethereum community can participate in this.
Is that?
Yeah, Buddha, sorry.
Yeah, is that 200 gigabytes per year or?
No, that's just this is a non-growing storage. The reason it's non-growing is data is stored on EigenDA only for a constant amount of time. Every data dispersed is only stored for 2 weeks. So you just refresh your hard disk on a moving window basis.
And what about incentives? Like, where does the incentives come from? Like, somehow stakers need to get paid.
Rollups pay a fee for data availability, and that fee is then channeled to the stakers as additional yield. It's the same mechanism as Ethereum, but particular economics of like how it's priced. Is it like 1559? Is it something different? We are working through it, but that's the core idea.
And if people, maybe you already answered it, but if someone clones EigenLayer, like how do you incentivize people to use your EigenLayer or like to validate on your EigenLayer instead of a different one? Maybe I didn't understand.
Oh, I didn't answer it.
Oh, okay.
Because it's the idea of that there'll be multiple EigenLayers. Yeah, it's possible that there are multiple restaking platforms. And if there are multiple restaking platforms, essentially you can think of these platforms as competing on either yield, right? They'll say that one of them is providing additional yield, other is providing a lower yield. And of course, stakers will choose the ones which has the higher yield. And which platform will have a higher yield, whichever one has onboarded more services. But there's also another flip side to it. It is possible to build a restaking platform which doesn't have to worry about decentralization. And it's possible to earn additional yield because of it. Just throw heavyweight services. You don't have to worry about what we are doing, like, trying to actually scale the system. Just take a Solana node and say that, hey, restakers run this Solana node, and now you're going to get additionally. It's possible somebody will come up with these ideas, but we are trying to take this approach of how to maximize the utility of decentralized trust underlying Ethereum. We understand that it's just like this a bioburst that surrounds us. It has to be treated with care and make sure to actually have a symbiotic relationship with. Otherwise, it can collapse. And so that's something we take a lot of care with. But I think, to answer your question on how people will choose, of course, they will choose where there is a higher yield. But what we're trying to do is to build a system which has potentially higher yield, but not trying to minimize the externalities built out of it.
So
okay,
these,
so I have,
go ahead.
Sorry. So, okay, I have a bunch of questions. When you opt into EigenLayer, do you automatically have to opt into another protocol immediately, or can you opt into EigenLayer and then like choose your protocol later, or maybe switch your
Yes.
protocol after you've chosen one? You can.
Yeah, absolutely. You can opt into EigenLayer and then not provide any services on any of these other things. In fact, we are probably going to launch an alpha version where you just opt into EigenLayer and not providing maybe other services, and then slowly turn on services that are built on top.
Okay, so does opting into EigenLayer to begin with require extra hardware requirements, or have extra hardware
No,
requirements?
just opting
Okay.
into EigenLayer without opting into any service is only a transfer. It requires a trust assumption. I want to be very, very clear about what the trust assumption is. You are pointing the withdrawal credentials to the EigenLayer contracts, and the EigenLayer contracts, especially on day one, we want to make sure that there are ways to upgrade the contracts if anything goes wrong, ways to pause the contracts. So there is the usual governance bottlenecks of contracts that one has to take a look at and make sure to opt into. Basically, that's all that you're doing. You do not need any additional hardware to opt into EigenLayer contracts.
Okay. Do you anticipate there will be protocols built on top of EigenLayer whose hardware requirements fit into the staker right now, his or her normal setup? So like the standard setup right now is a 16 to 32 gigabyte RAM, a 2 terabyte hardware or hard drive. Do you anticipate that there'll be protocols on EigenLayer that will fit into, so the stakers don't have to increase their
Absolutely.
hardware?
That's EigenDA is our first service, which is built for exactly that specification. Like I said, hard disk requirements like 200, 250 gigabytes, which is maybe, less than 15% of what, a 2 terabyte system is. You have similarly the node bandwidth requirement, which is, I think, maybe for Ethereum, something like 25 megabits per second, maybe for EigenLayer, EigenDA, it's only like a few megabits per second, so megabits per second. So all of this are calibrated parameters obtained from existing staker configurations.
Cool. Remy, you had a question, right?
Yeah, I had a few questions. The first one, so these EigenLayer services, like they're gonna be reusing the stake with the withdrawal credentials. Will they also be reusing Ethereum computation, or like the Ethereum data on like L1 data? Or is this like
No.
completely independent?
These are services. So these are what you're doing as a staker is you're just downloading and running this additional node software, right? But the way we are building these node software is amplifying or like plugging in gaps in the Ethereum modular ecosystem, where, for example, data availability is an example where we can actually, provide this data. And what actually happens for a rollup is rollup writes data to this off-chain system, the EigenDA system. And when they write this data to the system, they get a commitment of the data signed by all the EigenLayer committee, and you take this signature and then put it back on Ethereum. So the rollup takes it and puts it back on Ethereum. So in some sense, for all the EigenLayer services, the kind of back-end chain is Ethereum. Like everything is happening on Ethereum, all coordination is happening on Ethereum, all adjudication is happening on Ethereum. Jeffrey, do you want to add anything on this?
Yeah, so the ideal is definitely something similar to kind of the L2 vision of a lot of computation reasoning happens off of the Ethereum chain, but we plug into Ethereum for settlement and for sorting out disputes.
All right, that answers my question.
So I dove in there. Many people who know me know that I am obsessed with decentralization. I believe that a beacon chain without decentralization is worthless, regardless of how much money we can extract from it. So if we have this chain and we're extracting from it, but it becomes centralized, it eventually becomes worthless. And so when I think about EigenLayer, I'm hearing things like running arbitrary code in a local machine. I'm hearing redirecting a withdrawal address to a smart contract that's controlled by EigenLayer. And those are risks that I could definitely accept. But it also lends itself, if it grows too large, to becoming an existential threat or an attack surface for the network. And so my question would be, I talk about 22% a lot. I look for every provider to limit their scope of operation to 22% in every way. And that means if we do, if we encounter a weak link, then our network is robust enough to recover from that. How does EigenLayer fit into that in terms of like, do you intend to self-limit? Are there protections for the network against the potential exploit of EigenLayer?
Okay, this is a great question. I think, okay, so firstly, I want to distinguish EigenLayer from other kinds of staking protocols, which themselves, for example, if it's, think about a Lido or a, Coinbase or some other like staking protocol, which is essentially, hey, that set of nodes, one node or that set of nodes now control the Ethereum staking, right? Like for that fraction. And so the set of rubrics that we have to apply to examine what risks apply to those set of services is different from the set of rubrics we have to apply to EigenLayer, because EigenLayer is just a protocol. It's almost like a programmable extension of the Ethereum staking protocol. So the Ethereum staking protocol lives in the Beacon chain. This is an extension or an adapter that extends like functionality of the staking protocol. Now, is the best thing for something like EigenLayer to self-limit? So to understand this, we have to understand what risks underlie EigenLayer and how to mitigate these risks. And then we can understand what trade-offs make sense in terms of systemic risk. So the most important risk on EigenLayer is if there is a service built on top of EigenLayer and this service triggers a mass slashing, which basically for whatever erroneous reason, so this triggers a slashing. And if this slashing is triggered, then and all the ETH stakers who are basically staking on the Ethereum chain, they lose their ETH. This could be like a completely disastrous scenario. And so whether it's 22% of ETH stakers holding the ETH is still like a pretty horrible scenario, and we don't want to be there. So what is the right solution for this? We've thought a lot about it. Of course, there are ways that we have to vet everything that is built on top of EigenLayer, make sure that they are well audited and so on. But that is not enough, because we know that systems of formal audit are not at a scenario where we can completely trust it. So the way we do this is by having a dual trigger for slashing. Not only that the objectively this particular service has to trigger the slashing, but also it has to be approved by like a slashing veto committee. So the core idea is slashing is on EigenLayer, services are designed to slash very rarely. Only the safety of the entire service is broken, like a majority were dishonest. We don't expect things like this to happen at all, but they need to be put in place so that people, especially in a decentralized pseudonymous economy, we need to put in some protections so that people just don't do bad stuff without any consequences. So we have the slashing ability, but the slashing ability is triggered very rarely. And when it's triggered, it has to be approved by a human. We call it the slashing veto. Slashing veto will be comprised of prominent members from the Ethereum community. We want to engage as closely as possible. And the idea is they have to approve the slashing, otherwise slashing doesn't happen. So slashing is designed to be very rare. It has to be approved by a human committee, and only then slashing is actuated. So now, instead of EigenLayer self-limiting, one could think of services may need to self-limit, because the idea is that each service potentially creates a certain kind of externality on top of Ethereum, and depends on various things. We can try to understand this. But so this is the core aspect of the restaking idea, is that when you restake, you are basically taking on certain slashing risks. How to minimize the slashing risk to the ETH stakers who are opting in is something that we put in some thought into. In terms of existential risks to decentralization, again, like I said, we've been thinking a lot about this, and a different way of building a restaking platform would have not had to worry about these things. You could say, oh, just take the largest liquid staking derivatives and opt in, and that's a restaking. And then now you can provide services to new things. These can be very centralized. They bring in some capital. But what we actually believe in is that there is a huge value of decentralized trust. And I think this is something I want to emphasize here is right now on Ethereum or any blockchain for that matter, there is no advantage of decentralization given by the protocol. So if you're a decentralized home staker versus if you are a centralized, like one person running thousands of nodes, there is no protocol. The protocol cannot recognize it and award you a benefit for being a more decentralized quorum. And this is a disaster. We are not pricing the value of what decentralization is a value we all believe in. Otherwise, we should not even be here. There's no point of blockchain. So decentralized trust is a core value. But we are not paying the additional value that is accruing due to decentralization. What we want EigenLayer to do is to actually be able to meter and pay this additional value of decentralization. How do we expect this to happen? When a service is built on EigenLayer, the service could say. So to get into this, I want to just say that there are two distinct models of trust in Ethereum proof of stake, or in any proof of stake for that matter. One that arises due to economic trust. I have a certain amount staked, and that is giving me some amount of economic trust. And when can you utilize this economic trust? When there is a slashing protocol, which can take away that funds when there is misbehavior, that we can call that economic trust. But there is another component of trust, which is accruing due to decentralization, which is that there are many, many distinct node operators who cannot collude easily. And because of this, you get a different kind of trust. And there are services that can be built on EigenLayer which need economic trust, but there are also services that can be built on EigenLayer which require purely decentralization-based trust. And what these services can say is, I only allow a certain set of stakers to opt in. How do they decide that? They use some kind of a subjective oracle which says that these are the more decentralized home staker nodes, blah, blah. But they can set that as a registration condition for their service. What this does is something really exciting. For the first time, what could happen is, and I'll give an example of a service like this. I want to store a secret on a network. I want the secret to be private. So I cannot rely on any one node to keep this data privately. So I take my data and then split it into many chunks using this technology called Shamir secret sharing, and then split it into all the nodes. This secret sharing works if the nodes don't all come together and talk to each other and just disperse the data together. So, but this is not an attributable fault. We do not know if the nodes came together and exposed the data or not. So what a service requiring secret sharing can be built on EigenLayer and only recruit the decentralized home stakers. This is possible. And then what could happen is now a fee is paid by the service to the decentralized home stakers. This could drive up the additional yield for home stakers in a way that centralized stakers will not be able to take advantage of. This is a really insane idea. This is the first time that we can actually value decentralization and drive up an additional yield to the decentralized quorum relative to a centralized quorum. So another way we think about it is EigenLayer is a marketplace for decentralized trust. If it's a marketplace for decentralized trust, we have to price and value the dimensions of decentralized trust. There is a dimension of economic trust. And maybe for something, all I'm doing is, hey, do this computation, tell me whether the answer is right or not. And it doesn't matter whether $20 billion is staked by one node or $20 billion is staked by 1 million nodes. It doesn't matter because I can slash the $20 billion. So that is the only thing that I want. But there are many services. We want censorship resistance. We want collusion resistance. There is a lot of these things, which is really why we need a blockchain in the first place. And for all of these things, there will be an additional, one can turn on a knob and say that I need the decentralized home stakers to participate, and they will earn this additional yield. And so for the first time, there is a gradient, a drift, a value that is being created and paid for the decentralized quorum.
So I want to back up to the very beginning of your response to that question, when I suggested that 22% of network penetration was kind of a standard that would protect the network from serious faults, and you specifically pointed that toward exchanges. And while I do hold exchanges to that, I also hold every layer of the network to that geographical, political. We were even talking about architecture, whether it's AMD, Intel. Well, this is internal or ARM, but also things like the client that we use. And so I do not limit that diversification to exchanges or providers. My interpretation of decentralization extends to all of those layers, and 22% maximum penetration is ideal. Of course, when there are 3 architectures, you cannot have 22%, but in general. And so it sounded like you suggested that it was okay for EigenLayer to then have maximal penetration, and I imagine a scenario where 100% of Ethereum validators were participants in EigenLayer, and your security response was then that, if there was a mass slashing event, that if it was triggered programmatically, it would then be held to a DAO or a group of recognized and trusted users who would then choose whether or not that was a valid slashing. From the big picture of things, that causes me to feel like we are taking all of our decentralized governance and putting it in the end in the hands of rather than Ethereum stakers, rather the hands of people that EigenLayer has chosen to sort of be that governance backstop. And do I misunderstand it? It feels like that is
they cannot trigger additional slashing in some sense, right? So this is really like a dual stop on the slashing. So slashing has to be triggered on an objective contract and has to be approved. So it is not, I wouldn't say go so far to say that we're just relying on this group, right? One could purely rely on software, and we do that all the time. Layer 2s will ossify and so on. We expect the same type of things to happen on EigenLayer, where, for example, when a service comes and built on top of EigenLayer and they have tested enough, and then they say, oh, we are free from the slashing veto because we are now tested and ossified, and you move on to a layer on EigenLayer where you say you're not subject to the slashing veto. And so it's just programmatic. At that point, you're not dependent on this on this group of nodes to actually do anything. But since EigenLayer is a place for open innovation and experimentation, we do expect that there will be an initial period of time, just like layer 2s today have an initial period of time where there is a governance backstop. This is also, we think of it as something similar. Jeffrey has an answer. Jeffrey, do you want to add anything?
Oh, yeah. So one point to be made is EigenLayer still does exist on top of Ethereum. So when talking about things like contentious hard forks or attacks on the network, there is always that social backstop. So that still exists with EigenLayer. That's not going away. There's no way for EigenLayer to supersede the Ethereum community. The Ethereum community will always be able to wrest control from EigenLayer and do what social consensus dictates.
Yeah, my concern there, honestly, is I tend to hold distrust for any participant who feels as though they may saturate the network with their service, and that there are other examples of that, but we always recognize the social backstop exists, but the real intention is that we have a robust enough network that we don't need to call on the social layer, because to be honest, by the time the consensus layer is eroded, there's also a general social consensus, or in other words, a lot of people who already have a lot of money invested in that it's difficult for them to go against that interest and say, oh yeah, we need to slash ourselves to protect the network. Because by the time there's 100% buy-in of EigenLayer on the Ethereum beacon chain, you're not going to have validators who are then going to say, or operators who are going to say, oh yes, we need to slash ourselves to save the Ethereum network. And that's my core for seeking that 22% self-limit.
So let's examine like a scenario, maybe like a play out a scenario where this committee can do something bad, right? There was a incorrect slashing and this committee approved it, right? That would be one example of where, these are, if this committee is chosen inappropriately, they basically approve an illegitimate slashing, right? That's one thing that could happen. I think that is the worst case scenario. And in which case it is patently obvious to everybody that this should have been not approved, right? That's the idea, is that you're running a service, you should only be slashed when you are actually doing something malicious. But if you're not, and it is clear to everybody that that is not the case, and this committee still approves it, it's obvious that this committee has defaulted on its basic duty. And it is a trigger. It is not, I think the scenario that we have in mind when we think about staking, when there are different providers, is things like censorship resistance, which are very difficult to quantify, and they are not big enough events for us to coordinate any kind of a social action. But an event in which 100% of stakers are opting into EigenLayer, an event in which there is a slashing that has been triggered maliciously and the committee maliciously approving it, is actually completely observable. Clearly, one could coordinate based on such a egregious event happening where there is a provable, attributable fault on these parties. So there is a difference, but this is an input for us to chew on and observe, absorb from the staker community. We'll definitely think through various issues that could come up in a situation like this.
I think that my big picture behind that is many people will say, if there is an egregious act of malfeasance on the network, we can fix it at the social layer. And my perspective is, if we get to that point, we may have already lost the network. And while yes, it is probably possible to salvage it at the social layer, there's also a very high chance that we're not here anyway. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, it's too late. And that's just my perspective. I do hope that you will chew on that.
So we don't have a ton of time left, and I am going to go through some questions because I want to get through to people's YouTube questions. You guys up for some rapid fire questions? Great. So the type of applications that are appropriate for EigenLayer, what's the basic profile of an application that needs EigenLayer that's appropriate for EigenLayer?
Modular services like data availability, like oracles, like decentralized sequencing for rollups.
Okay. And do you guys have any applications that you see coming to EigenLayer first?
We're building data availability first.
Okay. Any external ones?
Sequencing is something many teams are interested. Decentralized sequencer for rollups is something many teams are interested.
Okay. And is building on EigenLayer permissionless, or do you guys vet or have some sort of requirements for these protocols?
It will eventually be permissionless. On day one, we will probably launch with just one service. This is because of the externality to stakers. We have to make sure that there is some vetting at least.
Okay. And do these protocols, do you have any are there any requirements on the types of tokens that these protocols can reward stakers in? Are they rewarded in ETH? Are they rewarded in the protocol tokens?
For the service we are building, ETH will be the token, but other people can reward in other services. In fact, we expect some services to bootstrap themselves by awarding a good fraction of their token to the ETH stakers.
Nice. Okay. Will slashing for EigenLayer services be applied to ETH or service-specific tokens?
To ETH. ETH is the security layer of EigenLayer.
I think that's all the questions that were left on the agenda and YouTube. Does anybody else from the team have things to say? I feel like we could have a 2-hour call with you guys.
I love it. I am so obsessed with the idea, and I mean, maybe people think I get obsessed with a lot of ideas. There are about 5 ideas in the Ethereum world that I am obsessed with, and this is one of them that I'm like, I can't stop thinking about EigenLayer.
Yeah, it's rare that I hear about something in crypto and I'm like, oh, that's cool and makes sense, and I'm excited to participate in it.
Sorry, one more question. Is there any code that's already auditable?
No, but we expect this to come up in the next 1 to 2 months in public. Yeah.
Cool. For the YouTube stream, we have a POAP, of course. Remy, do you want to go through that? Do you have the
I don't have the
link
link,
for that?
unfortunately.
Okay, so we will post that link in the YouTube, both the YouTube description and the YouTube chat, as soon as I stop talking. And we have some other calls that I just want to mention that are coming up. On Friday, February 17th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, we are hosting Lodestar. We also have a withdrawals call too that's going to be a tech call, and it's going to walk you through withdrawal credentials on changing 0x01, 0x00 to 0x01, and any other kinds of technical questions you guys have about withdrawals. And we also have a happy hour if you're going to East Denver, so check into our Discord and come to the staking happy hour so we can have 3 hours where we drink and talk about things like this. All right, that's it. Thanks for coming, guys. Really appreciate you guys all listening and asking questions. We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Thank
so much for your
you.
time.
Thank you so much, Remy, Nolan, Nate, Superfizz, and Buddha.
Bye bye.